Okay. Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore.
Did you forget what our greeting was there for a bit?
I did. Because I was actually just going to tell you about it, and then I remembered. I was like, oh, wait, we're doing a show. That's why I paused. I was like, wait, that's not right. That is not.
That's going in.
I was just going to tell you about the cousins Yamazaki. But yeah, today we're talking about the cousins Yamazaki in Legendary Lore. So, the cousins Yamazaki are a little different from the brothers Yamazaki, who were from the original set of Kamigawa.
Because they're not siblings.
Yeah, exactly. They're still related because they're Yamazakis. But in this case, we have these cousins. We have Norika and we have Heiko.
Heiko!
Now, yes. So Heiko and Norika, they're little 10-year-old kids, right? They're roughly the same age, all that stuff. And Norika is the responsible one. She's the one that wants to do what she's told. She's the one that wants to work on her homework. Heiko's the one that wants to go into the forbidden areas and explore them.
Heiko sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, basically the two of them, they kind of balance each other out. And this is in Eiganjo, the Temple Gardens. And this is a while back. This is why we're covering it at this point in time. It's going to make sense. So this happened.
Do we get how the Yamazaki dynasty got into Eiganjo?
So based off of what we saw in, what I've read and what is available story-wise, we will cover it at some point in the future if somebody's interested in it. But the brothers Yamazaki actually had their own separate story. They had a little vignette back in the original story.
About. And I'm guessing that redeemed them from being a Hyozen Reckoner.
Yeah, and I mean they weren't Hyozen, they were Goto's bandits essentially. They were his highest level guys.
And how was Goto? So were they bonded to Hidetsugu through Goto? Was Goto the Reckoner?
There were no.
Or were they just dealing with each other?
They were just dealing
with Goto.
Yeah, they never bonded. They would just work together.
Okay.
And that because Goto was tricked by Hidetsugu by giving him the Yuki-onna, and then it wound up killing all his guys. That kind of thing. So basically, the Yamazakis, the brothers, they did not talk to each other after the war because of what happened to one of them. The whole thing with the bow with the arrow to the throat.
Oh, they physically could not talk to each other.
It was more like the one who it didn't happen to felt responsible, and he wouldn't talk to him. They never actually say that, but they say that something happened, and that's the only major thing we know of that did happen during that time. But after the Kami War, basically a lot of the Goto's people, they just kind of stopped banditing, and especially the Yamazakis, they just moved to a town and they lived there on their own in their respective villages, and they have their grandchildren and stuff, and that's who they're telling the story to. So we know they did have children, and that those children eventually most likely became impressive in some right, especially if they had these legendary heroes, because they became kind of like these folk heroes, the Yamazakis. So that's where we're at with this thing. Heiko and Norika are two girls. They both are Yamazakis, but Heiko is very, very rambunctious, very adventurous, and willing to get into all kinds of trouble. And so as they're going, you find out they talk to each other, and it turns out that they send little hand signals to each other, and that's how they're able to communicate with each other. So one will be like, "Hey, get back here! What are you doing?" And they'll tap the side of their leg, and it says it's their way of saying you need to chill out to each other. So the idea basically being if one of them is getting or really out of hand, yelling and stuff like that, and they'll just tap her leg "Hey, calm down. We don't want to get in trouble any more than we already are," that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they both have had practice using that signal with each other, and of course ignoring it. And so Norika is "Hey, get back here. It's dangerous," because there's this weird thing happening, a merge inside of the garden. And we've talked about how merges are essentially these portals that lead directly into the spirit realm, right? Well, it says that there's this thing coming out of it. It's getting bigger. And she says she takes a step toward the merge, one hand outstretched. This, of course, being Heiko. And then the slash quivers and widens, and something begins to shoulder its way through the gap, and it's a figure twice the size of a human, wrapped in ghostly robes, with a sword protruding from its stomach, the hilt buried in its back. It has no face, only a swirl of dark vapor that reaches out toward the girls. What's cool is this is an actual card. It's the kami known as the Unforgiving One. And so the Unforgiving One basically just begins to go toward, and it just lunges. And Norika sees that and jumps, knocks her cousin out of the way, and is run through by this kami. Basically, when it hits her, it seeps through her and takes out little bits of everything. It leaves her with essentially what would become eternal pain. She immediately goes into a coma. And for the rest of Norika's like next 3 or 4 years, she's in hospital trying to improve, trying to get there's these like super advanced cybernetics that they're putting onto her to make her able to actually withstand the pain and all this other stuff. And she learns to kind of just deal with it, and becomes extremely disciplined as a result. At the same time, Heiko, because it's her fault, it's extremely her fault. She was a child, yes, but it is exactly her fault. If she hadn't gone on and done all that stuff, it wouldn't have happened. But again, she is a kid, so there's a good excuse for why she made that mistake, but she blames herself extremely seriously. She does not have any kind of mercy or grace for herself, and she's eaten up by it. She avoids Norika at all costs. She can't look her in the eyes, kind of thing, because every time she looks at him, she can just, all she sees is her lying in the hospital bed.
Sounds like an Elsa and Anna kind of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, it was 9 months with her in the bed, and they did not know she was going to survive. And then, of course, the years after that took her. And during that time, the two of them, they both became particularly strong in their respective disciplines. And like Norika, she became like this really, really, really impressive imperial samurai, while Heiko also became really good at what she did, but she just felt like she was being left behind. And so through all of that, as soon as she turns 18, Heiko leaves, because she just can't stand being there. But what's important is that in that 10-year span of time, because they were 10 years old, now that it's 18, there's about 8 years span of time. During that span of time, that was when the Wanderer, or the Emperor, disappeared. And everything started going, Costa Rica. So now Heiko finds herself in Sokenzan, I believe is what it was. That's what it's called now? The Sokenzan Mountains. And so she goes there, and she's basically trying to find the Reckoners. Not the Reckoners, the Uprisers. The Red Samurai, essentially. And she wants to join them. And she's like, I have money. Because I'm a Yamazaki, I have money. And she meets this guy, and the guy is like, basically he's a dumpling salesman. And he's got like little teapots floating around him. And they eventually she discovers that basically everyone there is an upriser, because they're all just done with everything going on. And they're starving, they're in the mountains, it's both hot and cold somehow, and all this stuff is terrible, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this guy, the server, he just has this giant vat full of food, and he's giving some to everyone. He's making sure everybody gets servings, and like the kids will show up, and they'll have like several like boxes for like their family members that are sick, and he'll give them all the servings, and they'll run off and all that other stuff. Like, it's a very nice moment. And she's kind of like, wow, this is really cool. Like, you guys are like, this doesn't make a lot of sense, and I like this. Well, these mechs show up, Imperial mechs. Unauthorized food distribution. To contest this, please report to the Imperial Depot at... And a snowball hits him. Unauthorized possession of technological augments. To contest, please report. And then another snowball. And basically, there's just people throwing snowballs. But the one who threw this particular snowball, this last one, that was particularly hard, was Heiko. And the guy that was serving the food is like, you should run. Like, you should go now. Like, go. Now. And so she goes and she's like she gets away, and all this stuff happens. This little chase scene, and the server's there. We're at the next spot she gets to, and like at this diner, and he's like, "You must be good at running," and so basically she befriends this guy, and they become extremely close. And she kind of goes up in the ranks, and she the guy's name is Chie. And they actually never say if it's male or female, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there's an actual description for them. But basically, Chie or Chie. Joe, how would you pronounce it? Chiye.
I'd say Chia.
Chie. Well, it's at this point that Chie sponsors Heiko and gets an interview with Rizona, the leader of the Uprisers. So Rizona does actually appear. I know we've mentioned her a little bit in the other one, but she shows up here, and they kind of talk to each other, and they talk over some over some stew, some soup, and everything's kind of great. Stew. At the same time this is happening, 12 years after that attack happened. So this is around, I'd say maybe a few months before the actual events of Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty, if that much. You have Norika, and she sits in a medic's chair, and there's all these needles going over her body and stinging at her skin, her arms, her leg, her back. Because remember when that thing went through her, it took chunks out of everything. Mm-hmm. And so her entire body is just covered in these, basically these turquoise hex, little chunks all over her body, all these augments, just so that she can get through it. And it goes from her perspective. She says she was paralyzed for weeks, racked with pain, and no one ever knew she would recover. And that they were constantly putting these new neuroprostheses on her. And eventually she was able to get out, and she was able to start moving around, and she was able to get better and better. And then Naomi, who is basically she's one of the main council people there. She starts taking her under her wing, right? Mm-hmm. And Naomi tells her, "Look, there's a bandit problem in the Sokanzanshi, and it's gotten out of hand. So I'm going to send you to go take command over there." So Norika's just gotten her work. She's just been given her role. She is going to go into the mountains, into the Sokanzan mountains, to Sokanzanshi, and she is going to make sure that she lays down the law the way she needs to, right? And it's cold, obviously, and Norika is wary of Aiganjo. She's weary of Aiganjo. So she's like, you know what? Let's do it. We'll go there. And so she goes. And now we have this moment. It's just okay. Well, this is actually 6 months after 6 months after that point. So you've had your new person that's gone in. She's which is Norika. She's the new sheriff in town, essentially, and Heiko doesn't know that. So now the cousins Yamazaki are in the same town, same city, and they don't know that the other one is there. Although Norika has a feeling this is where Heiko would go. During all that time, Chie and Heiko became even closer, and they go on all these different missions together. And the main mission they're on right now is they went to this train, and they popped it open, and it's just full of just rice, flour, barley, fresh vegetables, and preserved fish. All the stuff you could ever want to feed so many people. And it was just passing through because it was being sent to the actual Imperials. And Heiko's like the administrator. She doesn't know who that is. Should thank us, really. All this food just happened to get forgotten. We happen to be in the right place to return to its rightful owners, the hungry people of Sokanzanshi. And so all of that happens. They're all she's really proud of herself. And then a voice behind her says, "Such dedicated citizens of the realm." And she feels like these automatic restraints just cinch her wrists together behind her back. And she is also bound. And there's these two Imperial enforcers behind them. And it says the commander wishes to deliver her thanks in person. So now you have these two characters, Chie and Heiko. They've been captured. They're basically thrown down in front of the administrator, the commander. And it's at this point that Heiko sees that she's here. And she's like, what are you doing here? And says, what are we doing here? What are you doing here? Using food for 1,000 people as a trap. What are you doing here in this city where nobody wants you? And so basically, there's this, like, Heiko is immediately ready to just throw down with Noriko, right?
Mhm.
But it turns out that, like, they explain, like, yeah, this is my not sibling, my relative, my cousin, and we need to talk. And so basically, Norika sends out everyone. Chi is gone, the Imperials are gone. It's just the two of them, just Norika, just Heiko. And it says that as they're talking, Heiko is just very, very, like, obstinate, very defensive, very quick to anger in this scenario, because obviously Heiko doesn't really think that this is the right thing for Norika to be doing. Norika's the enemy. All this time, Norika has been an Imperial and against them, right? And so while that's happening, like before they left, she actually did like the whole tapping of the leg, like, hey, calm down, we need to talk. And she says, you're right, I don't want anyone else to die. I'm here to fix this. And when I saw you, I realized that, Heiko, this is an opportunity. And Norika just gets like surprised by how upset Heiko gets, because she says, I'm not a collaborator. And she's like, you grew up in an Imperial household. She goes, yes, and then I left. And throughout all of that, Heiko and Norika, they kind of like come to a conclusion where they're going to go and they're going to walk together and they're going to try and actually get where they need to be. And Heiko tells Chia, I love you, just trust me, we can do this. And he goes, you what? She's like, wait, hold on, say it again in my good ear. And they're like, that's great, thank you for that, appreciate it. And so basically that all happens, and Chia basically threatens Norika, saying, like, if you hurt her, I am going to steam the flesh off your face, because you are just a terrible creature, you dumb human.
Norika's like, joke's on you, I won't feel that.
Also, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but the reason there were teapots floating around Chia's head is because they're most likely a kami, or kami bound in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so all this happens, the two of them decide, okay, let's try and work together. And as they're walking together, there's this moment where, prior to them actually joining forces, they almost kill each other. Because Heiko is like ready to throw down. And it's like this step-by-step thing where, in order to get to that point, Norika has to say, look, it wasn't your fault what happened when we were kids. I chose to save you. I made my decision. I've had to deal with it myself, and I've gotten better for it. You don't have to shoulder that burden. I've already forgiven you. You need to forgive yourself. And it's like, okay. And so then at this point, after they've actually finally settled down, Rizona shows up. And she's like, I don't trust Norika. And she says, look, we can work together. And Rizona's ready to throw down, because she just saw the commander with Heiko. This is not good, right? Mm-hmm. And Heiko says, look, the commander has agreed to leave us the contents of the Imperial storehouse, and they're going to stop pressing the farmers for Imperial taxes. And Rizona's like, really? And looks at the administrator, and Norika's there like, I never said that. I never said I was going to give you the food. I never said I was going to stop the taxes. Hold on. That's not right. And then Heiko taps her right toe against her heel, which is their way of saying, just go with it. And at this point, Norika has Arizona's axe up against her throat, and she's like, I am going to honor those agreements, yes. And it's at this point that Arizona says, it's not enough. Imperial sluggishness will continue to let people die. Patching the cracks on the dam does nothing. We need a dam to break. But basically, Norika tries to be able to talk to Rizona, reason with her, get to a point where they can actually work together. And altogether, everything happens the way it does. They break free. Rizona and Heiko, they're able to actually be friends and like be family again. And here
You
it
mean Norika
says,
and Heiko?
yeah, what did I say?
Rizona and Heiko.
Oh, that would be interesting. But no, it's Rizona Yamazaki. She's the one. She's the avatar. And so it says right here, they retrace their path out of the snowy city. The warm lights, the forge shine through the windows around them. And Heiko watches her cousin as they walk. She can see the wheels turning in Norika's mind. Committees speak to and proposals to write, bargains to offer, deals to make, experts to query, technology to evaluate, regulations to draft. And Heiko's kind of looking at that and seeing Norika thinking about all these things. And she goes, you really believe in it, don't you? And she goes, not the decisions we make, not always. But I do believe we're on the right path. She goes, and even if it leads to rebellion, she goes, even then. And so, even though they've been able to create that bond, they eventually get to an Imperial outpost. And it turns out that the reason that they're walking all this way is because Heiko is going to show up as a representative of the Sokanzanshi people. And so, right here, she says that she looks at how Norika carries herself and says she looks like a hero in a storybook. Soldiers rally to her, politicians give way, even her enemies have to respect her. And Norika looks at her and says, do you think we're enemies, cousin? And at that point, Heiko kind of like thinks about it and says, no, but I don't yet know if we're allies. And Norika nods and says, I agree. And they hold hands. They don't hug, but they hold hands.
Forbidden love.
Cousins, Joe. They're cousins. It's Kamigawa, not Alabama. And so, yeah, that's how the story ends. Is with them going to try and fix everything happening, but we already, well, you don't know, but if you've read the rest of the story, you know kind of how the Sokanzanshi people have reacted to reform.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and catch you guys next time with, are we finally getting back to Kaido?
Yes, it's finally the actual main storyline.
We're finally getting back to the main storyline. Don't miss it. Leave a like if you like the video and subscribe if you like the video.
Yeah.